Thanks very much, Donald, and everybody for allowing me to have a few minutes to talk to you about Microsoft Purview. It's something that I didn't really know a lot about or hadn't really used Purview or its former name, Microsoft Compliance, too heavily, but had the occasion to in my last year or so in my current role. So anyway, today we're going to talk about Microsoft Purview and enhancing data governance and compliance. And so we'll kind of just go through a little bit about where I'm from and what is an RIA. I'll introduce myself on the next slide, but basically, that's where I work. That's a registered investment advisory, and I'm the director of technology there. We'll kind of go through some data governance challenges that my firm and others like us face, and I'm sure many of you do as well. And then kind of take us through, an introduction, real brief introduction of Microsoft Purview, how it relates to RIAs, some implementation strategies that I went through. I'm going to walk you through some screenshots of our current Purview instance, and then talk a little bit about some of the real world applications that we ran across. So this is me. My name is Nick Marentic. I'm a director of technology at Carlson Capital Management. Been in IT for 35 years. I love my dogs and all animals. And you can see a couple of the lazy girls right there. And I'm an unfortunate fan of Minnesota sports teams, so I had no horse in the race, if you will, on yesterday's Super Bowl, so I could care less. So what is a registered investment advisory? So for those of you who are not familiar with that particular type of business, it's basically a firm that deals with wealth management, financial planning. We take our clients and we walk them through different parts of their lives, their personal lives, and maybe business lives as well, and just kind of help them chart out their course, eventually leading to hopefully retirement planning at some point. And we also do a lot of tax planning and estate planning. So just a lot of, again, helping people use the knowledge that we have to, gain a little bit better roadmap for success, if you will. So the reason why a lot of this came up for me and other firms as well is being in a financial services firm like us, we run across a lot of regulations and compliance requirements, specifically some things around the SEC, FINRA. Those are kind of the two big regulatory bodies that we run across quite often. And I'm sure this can resonate with a lot of folks that are maybe in other parts of a financial services company, along with GDPR and CCPA and a lot of the other frameworks that many of us are all familiar with. And as we sort of went down our path and tried to figure out how we can better provide privacy for our clients, one of the things that came up was our risks of poor data governance, if you will. So what does that mean? We all have data spread out, I think, all over everywhere. We know we have a lot of cloud storage. We have SharePoint. We have OneDrive. We have others, Box, Dropbox, what have you. And this creates a lot of operational challenges for many firms and many organizations. So, that's kind of one of the first steps in this journey for us was getting a hold of our data and getting a hold of where our data resides and inventorying that and trying to make sense of it all. And we have one of many sort of special SEC regulated or SEC books and records rule that we have to adhere to. So books and records rule really has to do with, maintaining retention of data, our clients' data, and protecting the PII that goes with that data. So these are very important steps for us. We have to make sure that we're in line with these things, or there's severe, financial penalties, loss of confidence and trust in our services. So I think that not only is it important for a firm like ours to understand our data governance, but it really lends itself to, I think, all types of organizations, whether they're financial services or healthcare, manufacturing, what have you. So it really is a first step in this journey. And I think all of this journey, frankly, leads up to, and what kind of initiated this for us was, um, the prevalence, or the AI has become such a big thing now, and especially with Copilot, there's a lot of energy and initiative around Copilot, and I think that one of the first steps is to ensure that we know what type of data we have before we kind of go off and turn AI loose or Copilot loose in any organization. So really, it comes down to, it being all about that data, as Megan Trainor would say. And so, that's again where Purview really shines. It's a data governance, it's a data lifecycle management tool that allows us to track, what is happening with our data, allows us to protect it. And that, goes through many different pathways, right? So it's whether or not it's an AI generated, conversation or communication, and what have you. So what led us to kind of the Microsoft Purview platform, if you will. So we're a Microsoft 365 customer, as many of you are, of course, and rightly so. And so, my philosophy and our firm's philosophy has always been about leveraging what we have and what we own. There's, of course, many tools out there that organizations can use in terms of data governance and different strategies that people invoke. But I think Purview is really a strong player in this area because of its integration with Microsoft 365. I've listed, some of the core functionalities of Purview, compliance workflows, risk management. And specifically, I'm really excited about the ability to do some data management and auditing of our Copilot data as we move forward into that world. It's also really ideal for a company like mine that has, a lot of, regulation and compliance issues and things to manage. So it really fits in well for us. It has a lot of ability to leverage templates that are already created, and then make it sort of easier for an organization's technology staff to be able to look at what they have and understand where the gaps are, if you will. So for us in particular, or in my company's area of expertise, if you will, RIAs, again, it talks about data classification and protection. How do we identify the sensitive data that is in our ecosystem? For us, it's client portfolios, it's financial data, it's PII, and this is, again, the case for many people. Compliance Manager, or Purview now, has pre-built templates for SEC compliance, FINRA compliance, other frameworks, HIPAA, all sorts of different frameworks that, there's such a plethora of out there. It's tough to track those, and it's tough to run that gap analysis and that control gap analysis to make sure that you're adhering to those specific compliance regs. There's data loss prevention built in. This helps kind of preventing data breaches. Where your data is going, you're categorizing and you're labeling your data. And again, Purview does a great job with that. Inside our risk management, this is something that people, I think, people know about it and we hear about it in the news all the time about, some disgruntled employee or maybe somebody who's not disgruntled at all, but just, did something benignly in their environment and didn't realize they were doing it. Again, Purview offers or provides that kind of governance overlay so that you kind of don't hurt yourself, in other words. And then again, something I'm particularly really excited about as we continue the journey through Purview. And I should mention that I really think that Purview is not a one and done. It's not. It's a work in progress, and it's a work in progress for myself and my staff. So we'll never be done with it. There's always new capabilities and features and functionalities that are being built into Purview. I think as a result of that, it's something that you need to maintain on an ongoing basis. So that data security posture management, or DSPM for AI or for Copilot, is really, really significant for us. And I'll show you in some of the later slides too. There is the ability within Purview to connect other data sources, outside of the Microsoft ecosystem, because although as much as we love Microsoft and Microsoft platform, we use other tools, right? So we need to be able to incorporate those other tools and those other data sources into Purview so that we can holistically manage and monitor what's going on with our data estate. So I think the number one thing, and I wanted to take everybody through, again, high level, our implementation strategies, sort of the approach that we used at Carlson. I think this is sort of ubiquitous across really any industry. And it's really, I highlight, assess your current data environment. So for us, what we had to do was go through and literally, and it can start with something simple like, what are you paying for? There's a lot of times, I don't know if this resonates for anybody listening, but the concept of shadow IT, whether it's something that somebody does knowingly or not, it happens. It happens in every environment. And one of the ways that I have approached that is to look at, what the bills, what are you paying for? So you can kind of identify some of the areas that maybe have gotten outside of the control of IT, and that's okay. It's all right for IT not to have to control, every single nuance of a tech stack. So that's what I did. I looked through invoices and bills and worked with our finance department to make sure that anything I could identify that looked like a storage, some type of a cloud storage platform, I was able to kind of go back and track back and find out who used it, and go from there. And so that helped me build an inventory list of where my data resided. Also, you can look at things like, inherent in M365, Defender 365 or 365 for Defender, and things like that to find out and monitor, where people are again, maybe using a data storage platform that, you're not necessarily familiar with. So we looked through that, we gathered our inventory, and then we kind of worked backwards. So it's like with any project that you undertake, you kind of start with what you're trying to get to and the goal you're trying to achieve before you, start setting out your step-by-step, your project plan, if you will. And so that's what we did. We started out, frankly, with wanting to look at the security gaps and controls and gaps in controls in our environment, based off of the FINRA assessment that is in Microsoft Purview. And so we thought that was a good launching point, especially since that organization plays such a huge role in our type of firm's activities. So we started out with looking at the FINRA baseline, and I'll show you a little screenshot of that in a minute here. And that was kind of our goal. And we know that there will be goals, further goals down the line. And like I said before, this is a work in progress. We're never going to be done with this. It's like anything in cybersecurity or in any tech Purview is just to make sure that you're always improving and you're looking at continuous improvement. Also very, very important is training staff, training your internal technology staff, and frankly, training your end users, and all of your colleagues to basically understand why we're doing this type of thing. And I'll talk a little bit too further about the sort of the back office end of Purview, and then sort of the front end. What does an end user see? At just, maybe in one instance, what they might see and how they're involved in, maintaining and improving compliance within your organization. So training is always a big thing. And then I think it's important where you can, like I mentioned this earlier, I'm a big fan of using what you pay for and using what solutions you have. And in this case, I'm a big proponent of Microsoft 365 and using as much of that stack as possible so that I can integrate very easily, within that ecosystem. And again, I'll reiterate, knowing your data footprint is important. It's tough. Maybe for some people, maybe it's easy. My firm, we don't have a big data center. I don't have, big storage, NAS and SAN and all those types of things to worry about. So for folks in that type of environment and infrastructure, it may be a lot easier. It wasn't as much for me. So I just, again, want to reiterate that. And then I engaged with a trusted partner. And so we're lucky in the Twin Cities to have a number of them, and a number of them that frequent the M365 in-person user group meetings. And so you've probably run across their booths there. And so I make a lot of, I interface with them a lot, and I know what I know, and I know what experts I need to bring in to help me out. And also it adds as kind of a counterbalance to what I might be doing. And so, I think those are really just key implementation points to look at. So I'm just going to run through a number of screenshots that I took. My intention when I first approached Donald about speaking to everybody here was to spin up a nice E5 Microsoft sandbox and really kind of run through people through this group with a hands-on demo, but that didn't quite work out for me, so I opted for the screenshots. Hopefully these aren't too stretched out or anything like that. But for those of you who are not very familiar with the Microsoft Purview console, this may help you to kind of at least get a feel for some of the utility within the platform. It's certainly not exhaustive, but again, if you don't have Purview, as is the case with much in the Microsoft in M365, you can do demos and you can do trials, and I highly recommend that. Obviously, if you're in a regulated environment, you need to check with your compliance department to make sure that you're not running afoul of anything that they might have in place. So this is just a shot of the home screen when you first come into the Purview console. You'll see a ton of information. There's a ton of training that's available, so you can really familiarize yourself like I did with the utility of Purview, what you can do within it. And it's amazing. It really is just a super good holistic data governance and compliance tool. And so if you go through a lot of these things, you can find out for yourselves, and you can find out what solutions are available to you. And you can test some of those things out. So one of the key pieces that I use, and this is, we all, I guess, kind of like our, at least I'll speak for myself. I like my information distilled down to some of the things that I can act on very quickly. And in this case, this is one of those. So you can easily see once you turn Purview on in your environment, and this gets only better, and I'll go through this in a second here. This compliance score gets more relevant the more data categorization and the more different sources you bring into Purview. And so, looking at this and being able to say, oh, here's my overall score, And over to the right, you'll see some key improvement actions. These are things that you can start on right away. And Microsoft does a really good job, at least with Purview and many others, with understanding what the mitigation actions are that you're doing and whether or not they're gonna impact end users or your production in any way. So I think it's really key to before you start clicking buttons to know what the impact is going to be. And again, within Purview, they do a really great job of making sure you don't hurt yourself, in other words. So this is where I started. I kind of started down in Compliance Manager, looking at my overall score, looking at some improvement actions, and then charting out a course and a plan to mitigate some of those with my team. You'll see further on in Compliance Manager, there's some solutioning that you're able to do. So again, this just takes the mitigation actions another level down. These are some of the things that you are able to do within your environment, within Purview. So you can do some attack simulation training. You can turn on your data lifecycle management. So this talks about, what are the retention policies for the data within your environment. And again, this is great because it allows sort of that one single pane of glass, if you will, to be able to know what the retention policies are in your environment, and turn that on. And therefore, you'll know what you need to continue to keep backed up. There's things that have to do directly with Exchange online protection and archiving of email. And you'll also see some insider risk management. I talked a little bit about that a second ago, about not hurting yourself. So this is sort of a running list, if you will, a menu of many of the different solutions that you can do within Purview. One thing we started on was running an assessment. So along with knowing the overall score, we also looked and ran an assessment of our data protection and sort of where we were, what type of improvement actions we needed to take. And again, that just offers such a great view of being able to understand your environment better. Hang on a second here. I was gonna do one thing here. All right. So I was gonna bring over another screen here. I don't think I'll be able to do it, but moving on. Again, I talked a little bit about regulations that our environment is subject to. There's a numerous amount of these different regulations that provide templates for your organization to run your baseline against and understand, again, what type of actions you need to take in your environment, whether or not it's activated or not. And again, there's I think at count now, I'm looking at my other screen. It's like there's about a little under 400 different regulations, ISO, CIS, CMMC, just all types, NIST. There's just all types of regulation assessment templates that you can run against your organization. Here's what we did. And again, I talked earlier on about where we decided we needed to go first as an organization, and that was running a FINRA cybersecurity checklist. So again, just reiterating my same point here, which is this gave us the actions we needed to take to improve our score, that overall score that I showed you in my previous slide. And then, understanding where to focus our attention, where to focus our energy, where to focus our resources to get these things, fixed. Let me go back here. So again, excited about the capability within Purview to manage what's happening within your AI ecosystem, if you will. So if you're Copilot, we know there's other, generative AI tools out there, and they've just become, such an integral part of our lives and are continuing to do that. So this being built into Purview is a game changer for us. This was one reason why, as a firm, we decided that Purview made way more sense for us, because we're a big Copilot shop as well. So again, running assessments, who's doing what in our environment, who is putting, chat prompts into Copilot, and is there sensitive PII data contained within those prompts that could lead to liability and risk for us as a firm. So again, just being able to do this type of action provides that viewpoint into your into maybe the hidden corners that you may not be thinking about or worried about right now. Again, as Copilot, for instance, continues to become more and more ingrained and embedded into our environments, we know that we're going to need to take greater care, if you haven't already, greater care in just where your data is going and who's prompting, what kind of prompts they're putting in to Copilot. So DLP is a concept. I think a lot of what DLP is. If you don't, it's just data loss prevention. It's tagging certain types of data and classifying certain types of data. Particularly, and some of you may know this concept of structured versus unstructured data. Basically, structured data, think of it as in a database. Unstructured is pretty much everything else, your PDFs, your Word docs, your Excel spreadsheets. So being able to label and track those, categorize those, helps, again, protect the environment from unintended or maybe intended leakage of that data. So this is a big part of the Purview platform is being able to take that action. So if you can maybe see a little bit of a dichotomy here between these, there's things within Purview that fall under the auspices of monitoring and assessing, and then there's actions that you can actually take within the platform to close those loops and holes. So DLP, we turn DLP on. And the good thing too in Purview, you'll find this a lot, is you're able to turn some of these tools or features on in sort of a report only mode, so that you're not, again, initially impacting production or what's happening with the flow of data and information in your organization. So I think that's very important to do something like that. So you want to kind of test the waters and report on what's happening before you take an action or turn a specific policy on that, again, might detrimentally affect your organization. So here's some of the settings, that you're able to do within Purview. Again, if you get a chance, get a demo of Purview and look through some of these things, because you'll see that it's quite comprehensive in the DLP space, in being able to, again, measure and monitor, what you want to do with your data and what you allow and don't allow. Information protection. So this leads into, kind of one of the base activities as well that I talked about. Our first goal was to adhere to some of the FINRA controls. One of the principal things that we did in leading towards that goal was to generally try to categorize our data based off of some high level categorizations, and I'll show you those in a minute. And so what you need to do then in an effort to lead to that ultimate goal is to figure out, again, the criticality of some of your data and your documents. And you can do that through sensitivity labeling. And I talked also about making Purview, or, leveraging Purview to be sort of that all-encompassing, holistic single pane of glass for data governance for your organization. And you're able to do that because there are many connectors, if you will, API connectors to different platforms that you may already have within your environment. So for instance, for us, we use Salesforce quite a bit. There is a Salesforce connector, so activities that are happening within Salesforce, even down to the data and to what different end users are doing within your environment, you're then able to capture the telemetry from those and have that within Purview, so that you can again further monitor and figure out who's doing what with other sources outside of that Microsoft ecosystem. To me, again, that's a game changer. You need to be able to, understand what is happening with everybody's tech stack in this day and age is different, and many tech stacks are they're not standard, they're not homogeneous. So therefore, you need to be able to have that tool like Purview be able to see into those sources. So I talked a little bit ago about information protection and how and this what's the impact to your end users. All of the things I talked about kind of up to this point are things that can be done on the back end. These are the things that are important to IT shops and other business leaders as well to know, how their environments are being protected. On the other side, if you look at, how is this going to impact people? This is kind of I guess you could call this a very basic set of standards by which you could, launch data categorization in your organization. So, again, one of the critical steps leading up to your end goal should be figuring out, things like, if you have documents that are public, that you're not quite as concerned about, or maybe they purposely are, made and created for public consumption, then within the Purview platform, you can and should allow your end users to be able to label that document as such. The next categorization we went down on was confidential. Again, these are pretty, you can kind of read through these. I'd be happy to talk to anybody in the future that, about kind of what we did a little bit further about categorizing data, internally. And then we kind of went down to the highly confidential area of, what to do with that data. And again, I've got a screenshot in here that shows you in a practical sense, in a realistic sense, how you do that. There are plugins, add-ins into Word and all the Office suite that allow an end users to once you've created your data categorization policy and you've trained people what that is, you can then allow them to tag those things appropriately. Also, think about, I talked about unstructured and structured data. Well, in the unstructured data realm, there are things, that we can all think of: files, email, meetings, AI data. One of the things that we also tied into our Purview environment was we use Zoom quite prevalently, and Teams, and both of those things were able to capture and have a data connector to those platforms in order to capture, again, even more data as to what people are meeting about and if there's anything that they shouldn't be talking about, frankly. So again, this is just kind of a rudimentary high level. Many of you may have other much more robust or complex categorization taxonomies. Probably not a great idea to make it too complicated, but you have to basically take that with a grain of salt, see what works for your organization. This is where you bring in many business stakeholders, I think, as well. One thing I will say is that this is the point where we kind of went through our initial run through of capabilities within the Purview platform. And then we started to build out and reach out to people within our user base, following maybe that 10-80-10 rule of, your top 10% of people that are pretty savvy, your 80% that makes up most of your user base, and then your 10% that aren't quite as concerned about some of these things. So you hit that top 10%, and they really evangelize the things that you're doing within your environment. And in this case, that worked well for us. So I will say too that there is a little bit of a education piece in this, that if your organization is not used to doing this, if you're in an environment that has not went to the depths of data governance that we did, again, there's some initial education as to why you want to do this and the importance of it. And I think it's a pretty easy conversation to have once people understand it. So again, I'd be happy to talk to anybody about this, at other times about what we did and how this kind of worked for us. There's also a link I'm going to share with you in a second. Yeah.
And Nick, there was a question from Jason. Was it difficult to find a good balance that provided the security you needed without affecting productivity too severely?
Yeah, that's a great question. And for us, our environment, as I talked about, it's highly regulated. And so because of that, it was easier for us, I think, because you can make the case that because of the type of information that we're dealing with, in many cases, we don't have a choice. We have regulatory bodies that are in a sense dictating, what we need to do with our data and how we need to keep it secure. So finding the balance for us, I think the scale went heavily on the side of we have to do this. Then it becomes a discussion on, well, how heavily, we're not a Department of Defense organization, if you will, so we don't have to get to the depths that let's say a governmental body might have to. Finding a balance on the other side for maybe a less regulated industry, I think that's the tougher piece, because you don't necessarily have the backing, if you will, of again, the legal ramifications, of if you don't do this action, there's a liability, there's a risk, and maybe a financial liability, as well as a brand and trust liability. So I think that to another further answer to that question is engage with your user base, and come at it with sort of a reasoning for wanting to move in this direction and categorize your data more. I think that, again, with AI, and what AI was really one of the catalysts that drove it for us. Yes, you can have policies that you can, make sure you train your user base on, don't do this, don't do that, don't share social security numbers, what have you. But when AI hit, and I know AI has been around for a long time, but when it's become so prevalent, for us, it was we need to really pay attention to this. Yeah, so I think that striking a balance is critical. I would engage with your user base, and your leadership as well, for instance, for sure. So again, this slide really talks about how your end user base is going to be enlisted or engaged with helping you as the Purview administrator begin to classify and label your data appropriately. So there's a sensitivity labeling, add-in that comes into all of the Office products. I believe all. I know Word, Excel, and others for sure. And so what we did is, and again, the earlier slide where I showed you, the slide before where I just showed you public, confidential, and highly confidential. So we trained our user base as to what those categories mean. And if you come across a document, start to label those documents. Now, you can do this on the back end if you desire. If you want to basically enforce without any end user engagement, you can do that. We didn't do it that way. We wanted to engage our user base such that we allowed them to, first you set your policy, you teach them what each of these categories means, and then you as they go through their day jobs and they come across documents, you have them label them. So that again builds the database of information, the data labeling and categorization database within Purview, and it just continues to move your organization forward. At the bottom, I've got a link to a GitHub site that I also found very useful, There are some announcements and some PowerPoint slides that you can use to educate your end user base about what it is we're doing. There's a fictional company they use called Munson Pickles, I think, and basically it just helps you socialize this and talk to your user base about it. So definitely take note of that. Okay, so here we are, our success story. Here's what we did. We had fragmented data, and increasing regulatory scrutiny. So, and I don't even know if it's increasing at this point or if it's going to decrease, but be that as it may, getting a hold of and a handle on where your data resides was key for us. We chose, Purview for very obvious reasons. We own it, and frankly, it's compared to some of the other ones that we looked at. I find the ease of use to be far and away better than anything else we've looked at. Scale is a big part of this, of course. Maybe there's some on the call that have environments that are much, much bigger than ours, and maybe Purview, maybe Purview isn't the right fit, but for us, it definitely was. And just to throw some numbers out, we did achieve, fudge 25 to 35% operational efficiency. And so what does that mean? Well, that just means that in terms of the hours spent in tracking down some of the control gaps that we had, we were able to save that amount of person hours, if you will, in not having to have manual intervention to do that. So a lot of these things, again, that automation and integration between Purview and the other parts of your data estate, whether it be SharePoint, OneDrive, or again, frankly, Box, Dropbox, or take your pick, all of those things can tie into Purview and give you that holistic view. And again, it's always going to save any bit of automation where prudent is going to save compliance or resources on audit time we're spending. So for us, we definitely saw a reduction in the amount of time spent for people in our compliance organization or part of our compliance organization, the time they had to spend in digging things up and looking at different consoles and trying to collate all this stuff into a actionable or a readable format. So again, I talked about this is a work in progress. This is something that we'll be doing, ongoing. We're going to continue to reassess. We're going to continue to look at additional solution assessments, if you will, that we will apply to our environment. And Microsoft also within Purview, you have the ability to request additional templates if there is something that doesn't quite fit your specific industry. So it's definitely an ongoing, build for Microsoft. I don't work for Microsoft, but from my end, I can tell that they are continuing to build into the platform to make it, more ubiquitous, if you will. We're going to also go down the road of some further automation with Power Automate and some of those tools to basically look at some of the steps that we can further save more time for our compliance people. And so that's kind of going to be our next big step, is looking at how we can adopt and adapt some of the power tools into this. We're big proponents and fans of that. Integrate feedback loops. As our end users, I think of this more in sort of that end user perspective. We're open and we have a committee that is dedicated to this. So we have regular meetings where we can talk about some of the challenges and travails that they're going through at the time, so that we can kind of continue to improve how it works in our environment. And as new capabilities come up with Purview, we'll continue to look at those and figure out where they make sense, in our environment. So I guess the key takeaways, if you take nothing else away from this, I definitely want to emphasize the first step is get to know your data estate, get to know your environment, get to know your applications, get to know those applications and where they might be either leveraging an internal AI capability, because everybody's building that into their software application now. And so know that, get to know your tech stack. Get your data house in order. I think that goes without saying. Prioritize data governance initiatives. This is not a particularly exciting area. It's tough to follow Thomas and his tips and tricks, but I will say that it is near and dear to my heart in terms of just it's at the data is the valuable asset to us. And data can be customers, data can be unstructured data, can be a lot of different things. So knowing what your estate is absolutely critical to a successful implementation. And yeah, boy, I ended a lot earlier than I thought.